as once again, he used very selective stats to downplay Jokic, saying since 1991, only 3 players have won MVP for not being top 10 in scoring, that being Nash, Dirk, and Jokic. And what did he heavily imply?
Oh, yeah.
He implied it was very, very
Perk
clear.
was bugging with this. He says it was very, very clear. What's going on, y'all? Today we got Nikola Jokic has ESPN in shambles, man. Let's get into it. Y'all know what Jokic been doing, man.
When it comes to the NBA media and just sports debates in general, the past 10 to 15 years have been an absolute dumpster fire, as these shows and analysts aren't objective in the slightest, and the hosts have personal vendettas against and for players. And by their networks, they're actively cheered on to tear down players and discredit them. I would say this type of sports journalism started out with Skip Bayless, the godfather of the modern day sports show. And that era of first take, cold pizza, spawned off to someone like Kendrick Perkins, who just like Bayless, is a shameless hater, has personal vendettas, always contradicts himself, and most notably, hates Nikola Jokic. Hating on Jokic nowadays, it's not really popular. But back in 2021, 2022, it was pretty easy and widely accepted, as during those 2 seasons, Jamal Murray was out both years, and MPJ for one. Now, this year finally, after getting healthy, 2023 has been the year of Jokic, as his overall play has been simply fantastic, averaging 30, 13, and 10 on absurd shooting splits while leading Denver to their first finals. And while this run isn't over yet, Jokic and his team are roughly 2 games away from shutting up all the critics, and especially Kendrick Perkins. And when it comes to Perkins, if you're living under a rock, his Jokic takes back in the day were some of the dumbest of all time. Even this year, before the playoffs started, he accused the Joker of being a stat patter. What was his evidence? Really nothing. All this guy did was look at shot attempts by month. If you actually do that, look at it in depth, Jokic's shot attempts, they do fluctuate, but it's not some big drastic change. And the months they're up, that's when teammates like Murray, Gordon, MPJ were missing chunks of the season. That added context of MPJ being hurt in December and Gordon Murray missing a big chunk of February wasn't applied for Kendrick Perkins. As I'm sorry to say, when it comes to basketball talk, he's a one-dimensional thinker who sees numbers on a page and comes to a conclusion solely based off that. And the worst thing is, when it came to his Jokic takes, they weren't just based, not even in facts. There was a weird narrative that was very, very spiteful and just hateful on a different level. As once again, he used very selective stats to downplay Jokic, saying since 1991, only 3 players have won MVP for not being top 10 in scoring, that being Nash, Dirk, and Jokic. And what did he heavily imply?
Oh, yeah.
He implied it was very, very
Perk
clear.
was bugging with this. He says it was very, very clear. Yeah, he was bugging with this.
He was saying these 3 players won MVP for not being great scorers because they were white. Again, a weird vendetta, spiteful narrative that makes absolutely no sense. Because
I feel like, but
Dirk and
things like that, bro. I feel like that's just something he's just saying just to get his the ratings up on the show. It's gonna go viral, things like that.
Was indeed top 10 in scoring. In Jokic in 2022, last year,
hopefully doesn't actually believe that.
And to add insult to injury, why Kendrick Perkins chose 1991 was the previous year Magic Johnson, a black player, was the MVP, not being top 10 in scoring. Not only was Kendrick Perkins very disingenuous, his stats were wrong, and his narrative was crafted out of thin air. And looking at someone like Skip Bayless, Stephen A. Smith, even Nick Wright, they've never gone over that line to downplay a player. That's why when it comes to my Mount Rushmore of the worst NBA analysts, Kendrick Perkins firmly is in that top 4. Now, like I've hinted at in many videos, the NBA media very, very slowly is easing up on Jokic and the criticism, as even Perkins himself, the biggest crusader against Jokic, was saying on Pat McAfee, the NBA as a whole needs to do a better job marketing him as a player, as an individual. Kendrick Perkins, here's a suggestion. If you want to market Jokic better, don't make false narratives up to discredit him and downplay how good he is. And above all else, don't say Joel Embiid is a better overall player. And when it comes to marketing Jokic, it really isn't that hard. He plays basketball the right way, he's a team-first guy, an amazing passer,
Facts.
Unintentionally funny, and for his Denver team and teammates, is loyal beyond belief. He's not LeBron or Steph, he's not going to get those views. But if you want to talk about wow factor, outside of those two guys, the Joker's up there with the best players in the world. And I would heavily argue, from a pure basketball standpoint, being exciting to watch, he's the best in the world. I just find it very, very laughable. The biggest critic of Jokic, all of a sudden now is saying we should market him better after years of slander and BS narratives. And once again, looking back at the MVP, and specifically Kendrick Perkins. In general, for these voters, you want consistency and at least some standards. And for Perkins, for a long time he said Embiid was a rightful MVP over Jokic due to defensive impact. That's fine, alright logic, but for Perkins, is he always consistent? Look at 2022. Here's his votings. Giannis was 4th, Booker was 3rd, Jokic was 2nd, and Embiid was 1st. If these guys and analysts actually value defensive impact, which they really don't because they don't watch the games, someone like Giannis will be top 2 in voting every single year. And I think for both Giannis and the Joker, when they both made the NBA Finals, a lot of those narratives the NBA was pushing finally fell off. And for Giannis, he closed the deal, hopefully Jokic does, but he's still the NBA media for virtually every player. It's always over-the-top criticism until they win. And after they win, they're sitting there saying, well, how do we market these guys better? How about not slandering them 24/7 for not winning one championship? If you want to market the entire NBA, don't make winning a championship as the end-all be-all for sports talk and just player debates in general. And for this year, I'm not going to say Perkins single-handedly robbed Jokic of his 3rd MVP, but undoubtedly, he changed the narrative and was a fork in the road for the conversation. And by Embiid winning it, that was once again proof narrative triumphs over facts and actual production. And I'm not going to lie, if Denver wins the entire thing, I'm not going to care about the MVP in the slightest. Embiid can have that, cherish that, along with his second round exits. What I'm more shocked by and concerned by is out of the top 10 MVP voters, most of these guys weren't successful in the playoffs. Look at Luka and SGA, both in the top 10, missed the postseason. Giannis, Mitchell, and Sabonis were first round exits, and both Embiid and Curry were bounced in the second round. It seems like every single year, progressively, the MVP is getting less and less meaningful, and we hand out the award based off narratives and not facts. It's going to water it down in the future for the voters and the overall debates and conversations. And speaking of narratives, looking at this year's finals, after a 1-1 split in Denver, here's one of the big narratives. When Jokic scores 40 plus points, Denver is 0-3 and can't win. Okay, that stat is fine, it's true. But if you dive deep into it, is it really that meaningful? If Jokic in Game 2 scored 2 less points, didn't have 41, only had 39, would Denver have won by that logic? Or in Game 2 versus Phoenix when he had 39, and they won that game. If he scored 2 more points and had 41...
Yeah, I don't like that logic. I feel like Jokic starts to score more when he sees his supporting cast isn't really knocking him down like that. You know, he's trying to dish it out at first. It's not really going down. Then at the end, he starts trying to get his own buckets. I see it all the time. In the beginning of the game, Jokic don't really try to score like that. He's not too aggressive most of the time until he starts to see that his supporting cast or his teammates aren't knocking the shots down or aren't getting it done. That's when he gets real aggressive, goes for 40, you know, and they usually end up losing because it ends up being too late. But yeah, bro, I don't like that narrative, man. That's bad take.
Would they have lost? Once again, just like with Perkins, these stats are correlation, not equaling causation. As what you're doing, you're looking at 3 games, a very small sample size, no context to the team, how they were playing, on the road, at home. None of that's involved with these stats produced by ESPN. If you want to make the larger point that Denver, when Jokic is ball dominant, they're not as successful, you can make that point. But by simply saying they're 0-3 when he scores 40, that stat is fine for a baseline level of thinking. But from actual scheme and a game plan, it really means nothing to me, the coaches, or anyone on Denver.
Facts.
If they're going to win this year's finals, what it comes down to is their role players coming through. Michael Porter Jr. playing actual defense, Jamal Murray being aggressive, and someone like Bruce Brown or KCP stepping up as a two-way force. As when it comes to Jokic, virtually every single night he's going to bring it and be an effective player on both ends of the court. So that right there is the end of the video, and like I've been doing, we're going to keep exposing
And that's the end of this one, y'all. If you guys enjoyed, click on the last reaction, turn on post notifications, like the video, comment, and subscribe. I'm out of here, man.